Very good morning from Westminster, where everything is just about ready for the formal start of a new parliamentary year, the state opening of Parliament. It's an event which mixes grand ceremony with hard politics. In about an hour's time, the Queen will reveal the government's programme for the year ahead and the penultimate session of this Parliament before the general election in May of 2015. We'll be enjoying the impressive colour, the spectacle, and we'll be considering what the Queen's speech tells us about David Cameron's ambition for the coalition in the months to come. Now, the traditions and features of the state opening are reassuringly familiar to us, but there is one notable change this year. We'll have not one but two royal carriage processions making their way to the sovereign's entrance of the Palace of Westminster. Prince of Wales is attending with the Duchess of Cornwall for the first time together, and we expect them to arrive just before 11 o'clock, and soon taking position at the House of Lords we will have the Welsh Guards, 1st Battalion, and the band of the Welsh Guards who will be there to provide that guard of honour and the royal salute. Inside the Palace of Westminster, in the chamber of the House of Lords, peers are already claiming their seats. As ever, on state opening day, demand is exceeding supply, and this is the only time that all the peers are to be seen wearing their parliamentary robes. It is a sea, a glorious sea of scarlet and gold and ermine. They have a short while to wait before the Queen delivers the speech. Contents, as we always remind you, are not Her Majesty's work. They are written by the government and approved by the Cabinet. Well, now, later this morning, the Prime Minister will be leaving Downing Street for the Houses of Parliament. That is when members of the House of Commons will be summoned to the Chamber of the Lords to listen to the Queen's speech before they then set off and start debating its contents. A short while ago in Downing Street, this was the scene because Nick Clegg, the Lib Dem leader, also made his way. He's on his way to Westminster right now. This will be his third Queen's speech as Deputy Prime Minister, and it'll be interesting, of course, to try to identify the Lib Dem imprints on the contents of the speech. And Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, also left home just a few minutes ago, and he's making his way to Parliament. He'll be responding formally to the Queen's speech a little later on. Now, the tradition of the state opening of Parliament goes back, well, at least to the 16th century, but the ceremony that we see today dates from the rebuilding of the Palace of Westminster in the 19th century. That was after the fire of 1834. And a short while ago, a rather curious and old-fashioned security check was carried out by the oldest British military corps still in existence.
Search party, take up. Lanterns. Turn to the left in file. Left, turn.
Ex-on Major Christopher Cox, formerly of the Coldstream Guards, leading the yeomen of the Guard on their ceremonial search of the cellars, dating back to the time of the gunpowder plot.
Search party, by the centre, slow march.
The yeomen of the Guard, the oldest of the Royal Bodyguards, created back in 1485 at the Battle of Bosworth by Henry Tudor, Henry VII. And by the way, they were assembling there in the Prince's Chamber that is directly above the cellar where Guy Fawkes was caught red-handed back in 1605. Now, already this morning, there's been plenty of activity as the final details are checked for this year's state opening. And one person with a great view of events inside the Palace of Westminster is my colleague, Sian Williams. Morning, Sian.
Good morning. I have got a great view of events. I'm right in central lobby. That's midway between the House of Commons over there, the House of Lords over there, filling up, as you can see, with Commons staff and their guests. A little later, I'll be speaking to some backbench MPs, to some Lords, and also to the man whose responsibility it is to make sure today's grand ceremony goes smoothly.
Sian, thanks very much. And once the speech has been delivered and we know more about the government's plans for the coming months, there will be a formal parliamentary debate on the contents. And in some years, the content is ambitious and radical and there are dozens of bills. But that's not always the case. We'll have to see what the case is today. And to look ahead to the day, let's welcome our panel this morning. We have Michael Fallon for the Conservatives, and we have Caroline Flint for Labour, and we have Jeremy Brown for the Liberal Democrats. And as ever on these days, With his sharp take on what's going on, we have my colleague Nick Robinson, the BBC's political editor. Nick, we'll start with you. Just tell us what we might expect today, and is it going to be bold and ambitious or not?
Well, I think what will be striking about it is what's been removed before Her Majesty reads it. There's a phrase used by the Conservatives' new election strategist Linton Crosby about brushing off the barnacles off the boat as it heads to a general election. In other words, removing plans for new laws that will upset voters, cause a row and upset the Tory parliamentary party as well. So no measures on minimum alcohol pricing, no measures on plain wrapping for cigarette papers, no measures, thanks to Liberal Democrat intervention in this case, for a so-called Snoopers Charter intervention on electronic communications, for example. All examples of things the government wants to get rid of. And what it will try to do is say it's focusing on the really important things, the economy and immigration.
Michael Fallon, is that a fair summary?
Well, it's going to be a bold programme, it's going to be an ambitious programme. Some of these things we're still consulting on and aren't actually ready for legislation, like minimum pricing and so on. But the really big stuff is what the government is concentrating on, which is jobs. Already announced that the national insurance cut will benefit over 1 million businesses. 500,000 businesses won't pay national insurance at all. That will help them employ more people. And some radical measures on pensions and also on social care. And this is a radical government with still a big reforming programme ahead of it.
Will you have a radical answer, Caroline?
Well, David Cameron has promised change, and unfortunately things have got worse and not better. Apart from what you've said, Nick, which I think there has been a ditching of those policies for electoral reasons, I do think that what we'll be looking at today is whether we're going to see some significant measures to boost jobs, but also I think deal with the cost of living. Lots of people out there, real wages have been depressed, they're paying higher for their energy bills, their rail costs and everything else. And, you know, we'll be looking very strongly at that. And we've said there are certain things we could do in the private rented sector, on the energy costs for people, but also rail as well as jobs too. And the truth is unemployment is higher today than when David Cameron became Prime Minister.
Jeremy, when people see the list of bills, and we'll have it a little later, will they be able to identify things that your party has been explicitly responsible for?
Well, it's a coherent, cohesive coalition government, and people should look at it as a package which has been contributed to by both parties. I mean, there are some that perhaps draw more on Lib Dem instinct, some that are more derived from the Conservatives, but it's an overall package. I think I agree with Nick that the principal focus is on how we try and revitalise our economy, how we get the country back on its feet again, and how we get to grips with the colossal deficit. And the Queen's speech, excuse me, will have measures to stimulate economic growth, help small businesses. But I think also crucially, it makes quite a lot of big, bold, long-term decisions on things like care for the elderly, on things like pensions, which the previous government, in my view, ducked, and we have an ageing population. We have a lot of people watching this who are concerned about how to care for elderly relatives, for example. So the bill does have a lot of those measures, not just to deal with the deficit, but to try and create a fairer, more harmonious society many decades into the future.
More to come. We'll have more contributions in a while. I want to take a look inside the chamber of the House of Lords. It's a splendid scene. Work of Barry and Pugin, opened by Queen Victoria back in 1847. Dominated, of course, by that canopy right at the end and the gilded work on it, which is really a splendid sight, and the pair of thrones. We'll have something more to say about the thrones a little later. But let's have a look at the peers who are gathering. Lots of familiar faces. Former Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Ian Blair, Lord Blair, who joined the House of Lords just a few years ago. Also here, the man who until fairly recently was Britain's top civil servant, Gus O'Donnell, Lord O'Donnell, who's there just on the right, and that's Lord Levine, a former Lord Mayor of London, chatting to him before this state opening of Parliament. And we'll be having a little look at who else is there in a short while. The state opening, for many, is the high point of the year for pageantry and for precision and impressive ceremony. One of the most familiar customs, one of the most symbolically important, involves the parliamentary official known as Black Rod, Lieutenant General David Leakey, and I've been to meet him. No, this is where the real power lies. This is the government dispatch box in the House of Commons. This is where the Prime Minister answers questions every week. On state opening day, the members of the House of Commons are summoned to the House of Lords to listen to the Queen's speech. And the man doing the summoning is an officer known as Black Rod. He's a key player in the ceremony and the drama of the day.
My lords, pray be seated.
Everybody associates Black Rod with knocking on the door of the House of Commons at the state opening of Parliament. and thinks that my job is part-time and ceremonial, but in fact I spend the majority of my time delivering security for the House of Lords. That's my major responsibility.
This is the famous walk down from the central lobby here
Yes.
to the House of Commons. When you make this journey, what does it mean?
This is an important bit of symbolism, important for the constitution of the country. It's the only time in the year when the three constitutional components of the legislature come together. And I'm dispatched on order of the Queen to summon the members of Parliament to come to the bar of the House of Lords to listen to the Queen's speech.
We're in the members' lobby of the House of Commons. When you approach these doors, they will be slammed in your face. Why?
The real reason is in the reign of Charles I, the Black Rod of the day attempted to arrest 5 MPs, and the Commons took exception to that as an exercise of exercising their independence of the Crown.
We have some evidence of what happens on the day.
And indeed, there's damage to the end of the rod here, and it had to be repaired a couple of years ago by the previous Black Rod.
You need good aim.
And you need to get good aim.
And when you enter the chamber to summon the MPs, what are your thoughts?
2 thoughts, I think. One is one's got to get one's lines right. It's very important that these traditions and ceremonies are done properly and professionally. And I suppose another thought is that Dennis Skinner, MP, is usually there. He usually has something to say. And one's got to keep one's focus and make sure one's not distracted by him.
Jubilee year, double dip recession, what a start.
Well, a taste of Black Rod's work there, but as he was saying very clearly, most of his work is not this ceremonial business we'll see today. It is, in fact, to do with the serious business of security in the House of Lords. Let's go back into the chamber and let's spot who else is there eagerly awaiting the Queen's arrival this morning. There we have Lord Fellows from the world of the arts. And from the world of business, we have plenty of people, including Martha Lane Fox, the internet entrepreneur. Back to the world of entertainment with Llywela Benjamin. And then we have the former chairman of the Conservative Party, still a minister in the government, Baroness Varzi. And here in his first state opening of Parliament as Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. And then also there we have the former Speaker of the House of Commons, Baroness Boothroyd. More from the House of Lords in a while. Let's go over to Buckingham Palace, the first of our carriage processions. And as I say, it's a new departure this year because for the first time in 17 years, Prince of Wales is attending the state opening of Parliament. Not attending alone either, attending with the Duchess of Cornwall. Leaving the forecourt of Buckingham Palace in the glass coach. Prince of Wales, who last attended the state opening back in 1996, but he'd attended on 16 occasions before that. There's a lot of talk today about the symbolism and the significance of this visit. And they have a 12-minute journey ahead of them to get over to the Palace of Westminster. And we say a little more later on about the Prince of Wales's presence today and their appearance in the Lords itself, because there's a clue for you if you look at the far end. All eyes, of course, drawn towards the thrones. This is the great design that Barry and Pugin constructed, the great canopy and the pair of thrones underneath the canopy. The Queen's throne on the left, Duke of Edinburgh's throne on the right. That's very familiar. What is unfamiliar is this new arrangement. Let's look over to the left because we have a pair of ceremonial chairs or chairs of state, and they are for the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. Very close proximity there to the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. And all of these things should be examined for their subtle differences. Have a look at the 3 white feathers there because of course that's the very familiar insignia of the Prince of Wales. The fleur-de-lis as well, encircling it. And let's look for some of the subtle signals of status we have in this chamber too. Let's have a look at the thrones first of all, because Her Majesty's throne is fractionally higher than the Duke of Edinburgh's throne. That's always interesting to note, but that just tells you who's boss. And then if you look across to the left, we see that this symbol of status is repeated. If you look at the Prince of Wales's chair, fractionally higher. I think actually it's slight. The difference isn't quite as acute as the other one, but it's slightly less, and you can see that the Duchess of Cornwall's chair is slightly lower. So these little signals are interesting to note at this stage. Here we have a dismounted detachment of the Household Cavalry, otherwise known as the Staircase Party. This is one of the early stages of the ceremonial on state opening day. Lots of the troopers on duty today, very young. Some of them undertaking their first segment of ceremonial duty, but a very high-profile job for them on the morning of the state opening. But they will be lining the staircase, ready first of all for the Prince of Wales's arrival, and then, of course, for the Queen's arrival. There will be a third sequence as well, where we'll see the imperial state crown and other insignia also being brought up that staircase. So we'll be back there in a short while. Now, someone with a great view of today's events, right at the heart of the Palace of Westminster, is my colleague Sian Williams.
Yes, Hugh, in central lobby here in about an hour's time, MPs will start streaming from the Commons over there. There are about 450, 500 in there today, according to the doorkeepers I was speaking to earlier, and they'll move towards the House of Lords. There isn't much room in there, as we've already seen, so it'll be a bit of a push to get them all in, and they probably won't all get in. But three MPs who've already worked out their strategy for seeing the Queen's speech this morning are here with me now, and it's Penny Mordaunt from the Conservatives, Heidi Alexander from Labour, and Julian Hubbard from the Liberal Democrats. If we could just start with you, Penny, what theme, what message will be coming from the Queen's speech today, as far as the Conservatives are concerned?
Well, I would like us to be tackling those issues which have been in the too tough in trade for too long. We need to reform our care system so people aren't having to sell their homes. We want to address the anomalies in the pension system which discriminate against people like carers and those with broken work records. And with my Portsmouth hat on, I'd really like us to reform defence procurement and make better use of the budget that we've got in defence.
OK, but social care and pensions, two of the main things you'd like to see today. Heidi, if it were a Labour government putting forward a Queen's speech, what would be in it?
Well, I think the key thing that matters to people at the moment is jobs, and I think we would want to see action on introducing a compulsory jobs guarantee for people. Unemployment stands at over 2.5 million, with 1 million young people out of work. That's one of the key things that my constituents speak to me about. I'd also think we would quite like to see the reversal of the 50p tax rate decision and introduce that for earners over £150,000. Equally, action to tackle some of the bad practices in the big energy companies where bills are going up, the wholesale price of fuel may be going down, but those isn't passed on to consumers in their energy bills.
So those are things that you don't think are going to be in the Queen's speech today, and you'd like to see it. Julian, from the Liberal Democrat perspective, is there a feeling that perhaps the Queen's speech will see the government moving towards the right with its emphasis on immigration and welfare reform?
I don't think that will happen. We'll try to stop the Conservatives doing that. What we want to see is a drive for a stronger economy, but also a fairer society, and that means things which will deliver jobs. So the energy bill, which could support 250,000 green jobs, 100,000 jobs coming with high speed too. Also the work that Steve Webb, the Lib Dem Pensions Minister, will be working on to fix pensions, to make them much fairer. Norman Lamb, the Lib Dem Health Minister, about care and how we make sure that people don't have to sell their homes. And also I hope some good bits for high-tech business. We've already had announcements that we'll get national insurance rebates for people paying up to £2,000, which goes quite well with the income tax threshold. We've already lifted millions of people out of paying income tax.
Julian, Heidi, Penny, good luck with getting in the House of Lords. I hope you get a very good view.
Thank you.
Join us a little bit later. I'll be speaking to some Lords. It's a very big day. I was speaking to one Lord a little earlier who was saying he's been here for 18 years and the hairs still stand up on the back of his neck when he hears the salute going up that the Queen has arrived. See you later.
We're in the Royal Gallery. This is one of the royal parts of the Palace of Westminster, and this is where the procession in state will take place a little later on, when the Queen will process from the robing room through to the House of Lords. And there we see the Yeomen of the Guard just making their way, lining now the Royal Gallery, waiting for the Queen's arrival in a short while, in their very distinctive red Tudor uniforms, sometimes confused by the yeoman warders at the Tower of London. But if you look at the cross belt is the cue for you to sort of identify the fact that these are not yeoman warders, they are yeomen of the guard, and they're very proud of that identity. Plenty of ceremony, plenty of colour to come, and very soon the Queen will be leaving the palace. We'll be there to see that when it happens. But I did want to pick up one thing I mentioned there earlier, Nick, and it is to do with the form of today and the fact that, as I say, for the first time in 17 years, the Prince of Wales is here and Duchess of Cornwall for the first time. Their place in the chamber, very prominent, in close proximity to the throne, and lots is being read into that.
There is a word that is used again and again, and has been for years if you go to Buckingham Palace and talk to the courtiers. It's evolution. They always talk about the power of the British monarchy evolving over the years, over the centuries. And it seems to me the symbolism, huge symbolism, of Charles and Camilla coming in their own carriage, being seen alongside Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh, is, if you like, precisely that. It is an evolution. It is saying to the country, crudely, here's what comes next. We don't know when, we don't know the circumstances, it may not be for a very long time, and most people would hope it won't be, because they wish good health to Her Majesty, but it is saying to the country, get used to the idea. And I don't mean this as a facetious comparison, but when large parts of the country are absorbed by the retirement of the greatest football manager, that instant change...
You wish to declare an interest here, Nick?
I've just got a little bit of an interest,
I thought that might be the case, yeah.
But it is striking that, in a sense, this most effective of institutions in our country never does things that way. It is about saying, no, just slowly you'll get used to the idea of change, a change that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago. Remember the controversy created by Camilla's relationship with Prince Charles. Now they have concluded, after careful thought and research and consultation, the country's ready for this, so they're doing it.
Michael Fallon, it is being described by the palace as a gradual process. It's taking sensible measures, if you like. And just before you answer, let me just point out the fact that we have the first of the regalia processions with us, because this is where the imperial state crown gets its own escort, its own procession, because of course it is the supreme symbol of the monarch's authority and sovereignty. And this will be carefully brought out by the crown jeweller, Michael Swift, and handed to the barge master, which is one of the most ancient appointments in the royal household, dating back from the time when, of course, monarchs used to use the Thames to travel as their main thoroughfare, really. And in fact, the crown jewels also would be brought to Westminster by river. So the barge master still retaining that title, and 24 watermen also employed by the royal household as part of the barge master's team. And here we have the controller of the Lord Chamberlain's office, Andrew Ford, who is the man who looks after lots of the ceremonial and big events that the palace organises from year to year. He's the man really who's the mastermind behind lots of these big ceremonies and big days of pageantry. And it is his duty to take the imperial state crown into the Palace of Westminster. Just outside the palace, we can hear the strains of some Welsh melodies being played by the Band of the Welsh Guards, directed by Director of Music Stephen Barnwell, as Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Ford carefully takes the imperial state crown into a little room on the left, first of all, where they will change the cushion on which it rests and put it on a proper display cushion, because it'll be put on display in a short while in the Royal Gallery. And I'll have more to say in a while about the two other important elements of regalia, the cap of maintenance and the sword of state. Michael Fallon's still with me, and thank you for bearing with me. We were talking about the importance of today in terms of the changes signified.
I think Her Majesty would be amused to be compared with Sir Alex Ferguson. I'm not sure that's quite the comparison she had in mind. And it's not new. I mean, Prince Charles has attended the state, as you pointed out, he has attended state openings before. But I suspect we're going to see him taking on more duties now, certainly some of the more arduous duties, some of the overseas travel. He already conducts investitures and stands in for the Queen on a number of occasions. I suspect we're going to see more of that, and I think Nick's probably put his finger on it. It is a very gradual reminder that there is a transition in the offing.
Caroline, it's a wonder in a way, because when you think of Queen's 87, Duke of Edinburgh is, I think, will be 92 in June. So for most people watching, they would consider it to be a fairly sensible plan of action at this stage.
Yeah, and I think what Nick said is absolutely right about evolution. I think it's a hallmark of the British monarchy, and if anybody really in the last 100 years really changed that, it was her grandfather, George V, who really modernised, if you like, the royal family in Britain. And again, I think it's that sort of evolution rather than a break that we've seen in, say, the Dutch monarchy recently that is really different here. And, you know, people love the Queen. We've seen that in terms of her Jubilee celebrations, and I don't think they're ready to say hello to somebody else and goodbye to her yet.
Let's have a look along Parliament Square, because I think the Prince of Wales is about to arrive. Royal salute for Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. Back at Buckingham Palace, we have the second of the carriage processions, because this is the Irish state coach used by the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, as they make their way on state opening day. It is the 60th occasion on which Her Majesty has attended the state opening, a remarkable statistic. The Irish state coach, which was made back in 1851, I think, in Dublin. And Queen Victoria took a fancy to it, so she bought it, I think for £700 or maybe 700 guineas. Anyway, it was badly destroyed in fire back in 1911 and completely remodelled and again refurbished in the 1980s. And it is rumoured that it is the Queen's favourite carriage, but we can't confirm that. These preferences are never explicitly stated. And here we are at the foot of the Victoria Tower, the Palace of Westminster, for the Prince's arrival and the Duchess's. Duchess of Cornwall, safely inside the Palace of Westminster, followed by the Prince of Wales. It's the first time for the Duchess to attend the state opening. And there's our first glimpse today of the Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk, one of the great officers of state. He's the one who organises coronations and other great ceremonies and supervises the College of Arms. And it is his duty to greet the royal party, take them up the Norman staircase, the sovereign staircase as it's called, up to the robing room. We never see inside the robing room, that's always kept firmly shut. That is where the royal party will prepare before that procession in state. The Earl Marshal is a hereditary position. He's the 18th Duke of Norfolk. And his role in these events can't be understated, really. So turning right on their way into the Royal Gallery, and just a quick nod there from the Lord Great Chamberlain, Marquis of Cholmondeley, who is the other key player in the ceremonial today. He is the man who's in charge of the royal sections of the Palace of Westminster. So the doors to the robing room firmly closed. Meanwhile, in the Royal Gallery, we have the arrival of the heralds. They are the men who keep records of heraldic arms in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And they're led by the Garter Principal King of Arms, Thomas